have a talk on from here, the URTDC platform, on Judas. This is the last of our series of talks based on the Gospels as they were found in 1945, about thereabouts. We and other URTs throughout the world are united in making the pure teachings available for each person, check, test, and verify, make Theosophy a living power in our lives, and spread the original teachings as we found them, uplifting ourselves while helping and teaching others. The declaration is our sole guide and has always been the same, which is, the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy without professing attachment to any Theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the Theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification and practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, the profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers, the sole bond between its associates being that basis. And it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. In regards to Theosophists, all who are engaged in the true service of humanity, without distinction of race, creed, sex, condition, or organization, and it welcomes to its association all those who are in accord with its clear purposes and its desire to fit themselves by study and otherwise to be the better able to help and teach others. The true Theosophist belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Our devotional reading is continues from the Voice of the Silence on page 76. Such is the Arya path of the Buddhas of perfection. Withal, what mean the sacred scrolls which make thee say, I believe it is not all the arhats that get of the Nirvana path the sweet fruition. I believe that the Nirvana Dharma is entered not by all the Buddhas. Yea, on the Arya path, thou art no more Shrodabhadra. Thou art a Bodhisattva. The stream is crossed. 'Tis true thou hast the right to a Dharmakaya vesture, but Sambhogakaya is greater than a Nirvani, and greater still is the Nirmanakaya, the Buddha of compassion. The three Bodhis forms, this footnote here, is the Nirmanakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Dharmakaya. The first, Nirmanakaya, which we will focus on because the footnote is pretty long, is that either form which one would assume when leaving his physical, he would appear in his astral body, having in addition all the knowledge of an adept. The Bodhisattva develops it in himself as he proceeds on the path. Having having gotten the goal and refused its fruition, he remains on earth as an adept. And when he dies, instead of going into nirvana, he remains in that glorious body he has woven for himself, invisible to uninitiated mankind to watch over and protect it. Once a Dharmakaya, an adept or Buddha leaves behind every possible relation with our thought for this earth. Thus, to be enabled to help on humanity, an adept who has won the right to nirvana renounces the Dharmakaya body in mystic parlance, keeps of the Sabodhikaya only the great and complete knowledge, and remains in a Nirmanakaya body. The esoteric school teaches that Gautama Buddha, with several of his arhats, is such a Nirmanakaya, a God higher than whom, on account of the great renunciation renunciation and sacrifice to mankind, there is no known. Fundamental propositions, starting on page 14 of the Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, we found the three fundamentals that work together as one. They apply to nature's laws as presented throughout the Secret Doctrine. The first fundamental is on deity, the unity of all existence, the root of all that was, that is, and ever shall be. It extends beyond the range of human comprehension and can only be dwarfed by any human expression. It is beingness rather than being, and is thought of as a great breath, the one reality. It is the dynamic energy that might be linked to that small voice that wells up within every individual soul. That's consciousness that should be our guide. Spirit matter, soul, life, embodied and unembodied, what people generally call God or deity, is an aspect of life, the omnipresent principle, which invisibly functions in the atom as in the cosmos, and which abides as the self in the heart of every creature. Another aspect of life is law. People speak of the laws of God, the laws of nature. It would be more accurate then, though, to speak of God as law. God, life, self are not different from law. They are law. The spirit of the universe also surrounds and is within all. We eternal pilgrims have the opportunity to become gods, or one with the absolute through sustained effort. We honor the gods as superior beings to emulate, but not as beings outside of ourselves. The second fundamental is on the law that brings out an analogy between the processes of nature and the cosmos and in the individual man. Day and night, life and death, sleeping and waking, karma and reincarnation. Man's lower principles disintegrate in time, and nature uses them again with their various imprints or past life uses to form new human principles. The same process takes place in the disintegration and formation worlds. There is the perpetual exchanges of atoms, correlating and changing their combining equivalents, like the perfect flower dying in order to grow into a perfect fruit. Man himself punishes and rewards based on his deeds. As above, so it is below. The third fundamental is on evolution. The whole order of nature is progressively marching toward a higher life in the cycle of incarnation and necessity. No spiritual Buddhi, a divine soul, can have an independent conscious existence before the spark from its essence has passed through every elemental form and has acquired individuality, first by natural impulse up through the mineral, plant, and animal kingdoms, and then up to the human stage. After the human stage, we advance by self-induced and self-devised effort, checked by karma, up to the holiest archangel, Dhyana Buddha. Each entity must have won for itself the right to becoming divine through self-experience. The physical evolves gradually from the spiritual, mental, and psychic. Elementals are all future men. Each man has within himself the spark of an adept and can evolve into an adept through self-induced and self-devised methods, aided by masters of wisdom as much as is allowed by karma. So with that, we are going to have now the talk of Judas by the Spirit.
Good morning, friends. This is our last talk on the Gnostic Gospels. And I would like to start with what Jesus said in them to his disciples. He said that once I tell you the truth, you will be greatly perturbed and you may not basically like me. After having read all of the Gnostic Gospels and examine them from different positions, I have to say this student is not greatly perturbed, but greatly perplexed by everything that Jesus says in those Gospels. So today we'll focus specifically on Gospel of Judas. We talked about the history of Gospel of Judas and how it originated, how it was found. Just something that I want to repeat is that many parts of Gospel of Judas were destroyed because it was kept in a very humid climate. So literally when you read Gospel of Judas, there are sentences or there are words missing out of the sentences. So different translators try to basically fill them in or put in the footnotes what it may have meant, but we may just never know until there's another copy of Gospel of Judas is recovered, hopefully at some point. So I'd like to dive in deeper in the Gospel of Judas today, and I have read two translations of the Gospel of Judas, one by the Karen King in this book. This is the most well-known translation. And the second translation was by a different author. And what is interesting that the meaning of some major concepts was very different. So it really depends on what translation you read and who is translating the text. I will give one example. In King's translation, when Jesus speaks about the other beings that he visits and communicates with, he calls them generations. So he says, I visited other generations, and other generations will be greater than all of you. In the translation by a different author, the generations referred as races. He speaks of, and I have visited another race, and this race is superior or different than you. So the two words, generation and race, are quite different. Generation implies the difference in time, and the race may be existence of different types of beings in parallel. So just an example of the translation. Then just from the scholarship that is available, most of the scholarship of Gnostic Gospels examines Gnostic Gospels against the Orthodox Christianity. So most of the parallels, most of the analysis is comparing the Gnostic Gospels, Gospel of Judas, and the canonical Gospels. It would be much more interesting, and I think there is many more similarities if one would examine and study the Gospel of Judas compared to Platonic or faith tradition, because there is many more parallels. But that scholarship is less available. The student was able to obtain just title of one book. I wasn't able to read the book, but the title was basically Gnosticism and Platonic and the faith tradition. The book is available. Unfortunately, it's very costly. It was something close to $300. But this scholarship does exist, but it's much more limited. Now, going back to the translation of Gospels, it really depends who is translating them, because the translator is bringing in their knowledge of concepts and their understanding of what and positioning of what may Jesus be in generation versus race may be so important. And once we examine more messages in the Gospel of Judas, I will draw attention to some additional words that may be meaning something else that the traditional scholarship is examining. So in preparation for the talk, I tried to look at these concepts and go to Theosophical Wiki and compare it to Theosophical terms and try to see the parallels and search for the meaning that may be omitted in the general scholarship of Gospels, because they're examining against mainstream Christianity and what it may mean to the mainstream Christianity. So we'll start with the very first message in Gospel of Judas. The Gospel of Judas starts with Jesus coming towards the disciples that are in a deep prayer, in a deep worship and prayer of Christ. And he comes over to the disciples and he says, basically, what are you doing here? And he laughs. Throughout the entire Gospel of Judas, Christ laughs all the time. So he's a very mocking Christ. He's very sarcastic. So you will see lots of Jesus laughing at different superstitions the disciples are practicing. So the very opening page of the Gospel of Judas, Jesus encounters disciples and laughs at them and says, what are you doing? And the disciples are saying, Jesus, we are worshiping your teaching and you. And Jesus says, you do it by your own will. Rather, by this, your God received praise. Well, disciples are shocked by this, and they say, Jesus, aren't you our God? And Jesus laughs and says, you are worshiping your own God, that is not me. And then he further says about himself that truly I say to you, no race from the people among you will ever know me. Now compare this to replacing race with generation. Truly I say to you, no generation from people among you. So it is quite different, because generation means no generation of people will never know me. If you translate it as a race, no race of people. There may be other races, not of people, that they may know Jesus, but the race of people will never truly know Christ. So he's basically telling this entrance that you are not worshiping what I teach, and you're not worshiping me because you don't even understand me. You're worshiping some God that you made up. Then it gets even more interesting. He says, I'll now read you this passage. It was quite fascinating. It takes me a few moments to find this passage, but it's quite fascinating. So he basically tells, we'll come back to it, he basically tells disciples that not only you worship your own God, but you will lead others astray. You will confuse others with your teaching. So we'll come back to that in the next message. So disciples are quite perturbed because they assume that Jesus is their God and they know him. And then there is a sentence where a few words are missing. So we can only guess what it may have meant. But what Jesus tells them, why you are letting anger disturb you, your God who is within your will, and the rest is missing. So he's introducing a concept of God that is within you. So he says, you're worshiping the wrong God. I'm not your God, but there is a God who is within you, and that God will do something. What it will be unknown, because that part of the gospel was destroyed. So this is very similar to Theosophical teaching, when there is a God within, and the God within is basically us. It is a divine spark that is within each of us. And only through communion, knowing that God within us, that we understand the macrocosms, the divine outside of us, or can attempt. As Jesus here, that no one understands from grace. No one will understand, what was during action, that no one can know the unknowable. The unknowable is the first principle, and cannot know it fully. What happens then in the gospel? Then Jesus says, a perfect human, please come in front of me, who at least can come close to comprehension of who I am. And all the disciples turn their heads away because they realize that they are not perfect and they can't even look at Christ because they are really don't know him. The only one disciple that steps in front of the Jesus is Judas. And Judas is able to look at Christ and hold his gaze. So he says, here I am, Jesus. And then Jesus tells Judas, yes, and you will be the 13th, and you will separate yourself from others, because you're basically the closest of all of them to understanding my nature and what I teach. Then Judas tells Christ that here I stand in front of you, and I can look at you, and I know that you come from the real, even mortal Bardelo. And I am not worthy, basically, of being with you. So this is the first time when disciples are worshiping Jesus as a God. He is the supreme God. He is the Son of God. When Judas steps in front of Christ and says, I know the truth. You're coming from the real or Bardelo, and I'm not worthy of being with you. So he introduces a completely new concept that we find in the canonical Christian Gospels and Orthodox Christianity. And we've talked a little bit about this cosmology in the Gnosticism. I would like to repeat it because it's very complex. So the very first concept is substance. It's not material, it's not spiritual, but it's a realm. And I'm not quite sure Pleroma comes before the one or up, or one basically emanates Pleroma, but there is a Pleroma that is a vast cosmic space in which the principle of one appears. And he is the Father, also called the monad, the unknowable. So here is the one, the Father, and what happens next? He looks into the mirror, whatever that mirror is, and in the mirror he sees Bardelo. So he looks at himself, and in the mirror of himself, he sees Bardelo. Bardelo is the female principle of the first, the female aspect of the first principle. That's probably the best way to put it. So he sees Bardelo. The immutable one. He doesn't create the female. He sees that as a reflection of him. So it's a total unity of two principles in one. And from that reflection, when the
Sandra?
Yes?
Your image is very distorted. Can you move the laptop a bit closer? Because you're cutting in and out. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's good, because we are testing this. Okay.
Okay, that's a little better.
That's
Do
better.
you have good Wi-Fi? Yeah, okay.
So is that good?
That's better, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we moved it too far from the Wi-Fi area. So now we go to the Bardelo, and here is the very interesting part: is the Father does not create the feminine. He and the Bardelo are one. He sees it in the mirror as his reflection, and from seeing that aspect of himself comes the first spark of light. That could be the foha. So comes the first spark of light. In some Gospels, it's referred as Christ. In the Gospel of Judas, there is no reference to this. But basically, I would compare in Theosophical tradition that first spark of light is the foha, that then inhibits every soul. Then from that, in that realm, they create ions. Ions are basically divine beings that inhabit everything in the and the very last one is Sophia. Sophia is basically the last child of Father and the Bardelo.
Ions,
Ions, yeah. Ions are the divine beings created within Pleroma by the Father and the Bardelo. So here, no, not yet.
Okay.
So here is where the error, and that's very important in Gnosticism, error, and it's called as error, not evil, but error. This is where the error happens. When Sophia, who is very wise and very willed, and she sees all the creation, she decides to create out of herself without her partner. Whoever that partner is, we never hear anything about the partner, but she creates out of herself, without consent of the Father and without her partner, and whom she creates. I'll have to erase a little bit. Yeah, she creates Yaldabaoth. Yaldabaoth. He is also called Cephas. He is also called the fool. He is also called the craftsman. And then she expels him from Pleroma, that divine state where everything exists. She expels him out, and Yaldabaoth, since he's seen some light of Pleroma and how things work, decides that he will create basically the entire life on the earth. So he creates the Adam and Eve. He creates all the angels and archangels. He creates the entire cosmology that we know of, but all of this is error and nothing works. That's why there are wars, there is hunger. That's why the entire existence is based on consuming each other. That to survive, we have to consume the other, because it's not created within the Pleroma by the Divine Father and Mother. It got created by this, he's also called Child of Chaos. Child of Chaos. It's created by Child of Chaos of Sophia, who creates an entire existence based on that error. So all of the angels, all archangels, the Yahweh, who is also Yaldabaoth, the God of the Old Testament of Judaism, they're all creation of the error. And this is where Judas, the first disciple, that's why the statement so important. He says, I know you, Jesus. You come from Bardelo. I'm not from this realm. In this realm, we worship our gods, we worship our angels, the entire structure of divinity, but you do not belong to that. You're coming from Bardelo. So right away, he separates him from every worship, everything that every sacred text ever mentioned. So that's the first message in the Gospel of Judas, that basically saying that the divine, the first principle, is unknowable, and all of the worship on the earthly plane is not of that, because we are not even capable of knowing it, but of our own cosmology and our own divinities that we created in error, because we were creation of the Child of Chaos, of the Yaldabaoth, Cephas, the fool, the craftsman. So now we'll go to the second message. Is where Jesus states something extremely interesting. He basically implies that there is another race, and he is going there. He calls it strong and holy race. In another translation, it's called strong and holy generation, but the one that I've read basically refers to a holy race. And there he says that it doesn't come from human beings, it exists somewhere separately. And it has powerful authorities and will never be influenced by the laws of the earthly realm. And I'll read exactly basically what he states, the passage from the Gospel. I went to another great holy race. No offspring of this ion will see that race, or any angelic army rule after that race. So he said that no one in our human race will ever see that race, and no angelic army. Again, we have our own angelic armies that are not part of the Pleroma, Bardelo, and the Father, and no angelic beings or any beings of this realm will ever rule over that race. That race does not come from, and the word is missing, the most interesting word. That race doesn't come from, the word is missing because of the bad condition of the text. The race of human beings that are among them, but is from the race, and this is in capital, those great people. That the powerful authorities, that nor any power there by which you rule. There are several words missing, so we don't really fully comprehend this passage because there is three critical words missing. But we know that basically Jesus visits some other race that exists in parallel. It's not race of human beings, and it's not ruled by same authorities that rule our race. And it is the race of those great people. So this is quite fascinating, what it may be. That can be the basic reference to the race of masters, maybe enlightened beings, but his sattva's, arhats, we can only guess. But that race definitely not ruled by our principles, so that they don't need to eat, they don't need to survive on killing others. They basically have an entire different structure to their, even if they're physical. I'm not sure they're physical, they're probably most likely non-physical. But that's the reference he makes. Again, nowhere else but in this gospel we see Jesus referring to visiting that other strong and holy race. And it could be that basically this is where the enlightened souls go and come back as the masters to teach us. Then let me see this race. Then the third message, the third sort of theme of the gospel is with disciples having a vision. Disciples say, Jesus, we see a vision. Help us understand it. It was a very disturbing vision. And Jesus says, tell me about your vision. And they say, we have a vision that there is a great house and a great altar in the house. And there are 12 priests who are worshiping and sacrificing on that altar. And there is all sins that are happening around that altar. Basically, anything that you can imagine is happening in that house. So every single sin is being committed of malice, and there is sacrifices on the altar, and there are 12 administering those sacrifices. Jesus listens to them, and he basically says that the vision is of themselves in time. It is them, the 12 disciples, who are misinterpreting the teaching and leading the masses astray and creating that house of sin and error. So in the gospel, Jesus tells the disciples that they will not understand his teaching and they will lead humanity astray, that those who will follow 12 disciples and their teachings will go astray and commit sins and will be living in error and in darkness. And I'll read the exact passage from that. So there's altar with priests making offerings in Jesus' name. I say to you that they have written my name upon the word is missing, of the races of the stars. So the races of human beings, and in my home, they shamefully planted fruitless tree. So the 12 disciples are planting fruitless tree in the name of Jesus in the home of his teachings. Then he says, the cattle of the altar is the multitude you will lead astray. So the sacrifices that you're doing at the altar are throughout the history. Those were the crusades, there were the witch burnings, there were the multitudes of basically atrocities committed in the name of Christian faith that were made the sacrifices on the altar. And it's fascinating to see Jesus telling the disciples, this is what you are doing. Then he says, interesting passage, just like this passage a lot, it's on the animals. He says, stop sacrificing animals because they are over your stars and your angels, having previously come to completion there. This is very puzzling statement. So he basically says that the animals are over your stars, whatever stars mean. Stars have some symbology. There is some concept behind that. And they're over your angels. So he puts animals higher than our angels. And he says that they already previously came to completion. But stop sacrificing and treating them that they are lesser than you.
But that relates to, I think, the idea that all angels have not had the experience of the earth life. But these animals have, at least
So they're more complete.
Little experience. So that's really
Interesting.
very theosophical, I think.
Yes, and that was sort of this interesting, very true. Yeah, because they already came to completion of having physicality. Then he says, stop contending with me. Each of you has his own star, and the word is missing. Of the star's will, word is missing, what is his? So what we know from this passage is that Jesus says, stop contending with me. Basically, stop worshiping me and thinking that through me you're saved. Don't contend with me. Don't think that because you think you know me or you worship me, you can be content. You each one have your own star. You each one basically have the way I would interpret your star, your path, your growth, your evolution, your cycle. You have your star to find the God within, because before that he said that you will find me through the God within. So he says you have your own star, and of the stars something will come of the stars. Then again, we're missing the rest of the words. So this is the third message that Jesus gives in the Gospel of Judas. Then it gets even more interesting because then Judas has a vision. He has a vision that there is a house with greenery. It's very beautiful. And there are multitudes of people in that house. And he is there. And he asks, and they're all very happy and they're very content and very joyful. And then he asks Jesus, what is that house? And may I go there one day in my vision? And Jesus explains this house. This is also a very interesting concept. Jesus says, it is that place that is kept for the holy ones, the place where neither the sun nor the moon will rule, nor the day, but they will stand or rest in the eon. So it's a place where no sun or the moon will rule. So basically there is no cycle, there's no physicality. The sun and the moon ruling over the earth that is material. So the sun and the moon don't rule there, and they will stand at rest in the eon. Eon is, I believe, 6 billion years, or basically a very long time. Also, eon term was a bit confusing because it was both referring to the divine beings that created in Pleroma and to the period of time. So it was quite interesting that there's two meanings. So trying to understand what is that house with greenery, with multitudes of people that all stand in total peace and joy, and everything stands still. The students thought that there is some similarity to Devachan. But the only confusion, why only holy ones go there? because Devachan basically the state after death. It's not only for the holy, but maybe there is more comments from the other students to understand this. But by other description, it does sound like Devachan because there's nor sun nor the moon rule there. It's no longer physical, nor the days. There's no days, nights, but they will stand or rest in the eon. Mm-hmm.
That's because the perfected ones don't have to go through that.
Mm-hmm.
We have to.
Mm-hmm. So they can stay there. The holy can stay there for eon.
Yeah.
So that's probably most likely reference that those who reached perfection can go there and stay there in that state. Basically, they move from the world created in error, where there is death, because that's how the craftsman created us, with death. In this realm, the realm of the Father and Pleroma, there is no death. So they transition from the realm of our error into that eternal state. So in a way, the Christian heaven was not too far. It just was misunderstood. It's not a heaven where you go because you go to what it is and being in that state. So that was Judas's vision and his comment. Now the next part, so this is the first part of the Gospel of Judas, is the messages that Jesus delivers to the disciples and laughs at them and questions them. The second part is his revelations to Judas. And that's where it gets really complex. Basically, he explains cosmology to Judas. And I would say this is based on the first half of the secret doctrine of Gnosticism. It is getting very, very complex. Some of it I already described here, that basically there is a pleroma, then there is the monad that sees his own reflection in Bardelo, and from that realization of his reflection as feminine, they give birth to the first light, and then the material, not even material, to basically all existence in Pleroma. None of this is material. The only material world created by Yaldabaoth, the son of Sophia. There is a creation of Adamas. I'm not quite sure about the Adamas, but it's like a predecessor of Adam in the spiritual realm. So the Adamas is one of the first luminaries, the first emanations. And then there is this lineage of Seth that creates this real race, real holy beings. So maybe those who belong to Sethian race, that's whom Jesus visits, the strong and holy race. I'm not sure. Then there's also interesting explanation of Bardelo. Bardelo is a reflection of the one, and it is also called paranoia, and it's also called forethought, the first thought of the Father. So the very first thought of the monad of unknowns, or the first reflection, first conscious decision, so to say, in our words, we don't even have words to describe it, was Bardelo, the feminine side. So that was interesting. That was his very first thought, forethought. His first thought was probably the creation of the universe, but forethought was her. And she's also called forethought or paranoia. Then she gives birth to the spark of light. Then we have this entire error and the problem created by Sophia and Yaldabaoth, who is called also Cephas. What is interesting that nobody punishes Sophia. Sophia sort of says, "Oh, sorry, you go away, don't disturb Pleroma," but we don't know, did anything happen to Sophia? Did she suffer any consequences? Or she learned from the lesson not to create things like this. Then there's also very interesting in this Revelations, there is very interesting passages on the origins of humans, that the humans were created by Cephas, by the fool, but then somebody in that Pleroma somehow asks Michael to lend spirit to humans so they may serve. And that's exactly the passage. Basically, someone from this holy state gives, supposedly Michael gives humans a soul so they may serve. And it's very similar to secret did not have the divine spark. And when we receive the divine spark, we basically gain consciousness and start our cycle of evolution. And what's very interesting that here, it doesn't say, and Michael lends spirit to humans so they could be gods, so they could evolve, so they could be conscious. He gives spirit to humans so they might serve. So service is the ultimate sort of evidence of that spark of consciousness of being divine. And then he says that this is so the kings of chaos don't rule over you. So Michael gives that spark, the soul, to humans so they may serve, and the kings of chaos would not rule over us. So that's one of the key topics in the Revelations. And the most fascinating, I think, concept that resonates with the Theosophical concept is the emanation of one. They also called the Father, the monad. Monad, by definition, is the one, something indivisible. And there is lots of similarities of that, both with Theosophy, with their fake tradition, Pythagorean and Platonic traditions. So those are just a few takeaways from the Gospel of Judas. If we could have had it in a preserved state and not missing every other word for some reason in the most important passages, probably would be easier to interpret and understand the meaning. But also it is very important, again, who is translating and how we're translating the concepts, because we're not translating words. It's the same as translating the secret doctrine. Every translation. So we're so lucky to have secret doctrine and being able to read it in its original language, because with each translation, some meaning is removed. So if there are any questions on the Gospel of Judas, we can discuss that, or maybe there are some insights into the Gospel of Judas. I'm sure there are more insights, questions, intuitions than our mind can understand about this. Or anybody perplexed or perturbed?
Well, it's not, I don't think I'm perturbed, nor perplexed. I'm perplexed, all right, because this is completely different than the Judas I was imagining was based on my upbringing. Judas was an outsider, a sort of a traitor, if you will. But Judas is the only one that really understood what Jesus was trying to say.
But what is also interesting that at the end of the gospel, Jesus tells Judas that it will be your job to betray the flesh in which I am using right now. He doesn't say you will betray me, Jesus. He says, Judas, it is my plan for you. You will have to suffer because you will have to betray the flesh of the man that I'm basically using.
So that's relates to what we are the same thing. We are a soul. We are a spirit. We're part of all this all. And Jesus was too in a body. And we only saw the body. We had to understand this to understand that he was from a different Bardelo.
Different real.
Yeah, we're not from that. We're from all this error. And we're given a soul, if you will, and Michael gave us a soul, so that we could have the chance to work our way through this mess and be comparable to Bardelo.
Yeah, to me this is very interesting indeed, because when you look with the reason of our state of existence, it's built on the laws of violence. That for any material being to survive, they have to consume something else. That at the very foundation of it, we have to use energy of someone else. It's also built on, in a way, on a sacrifice. Something has to die for something to exist. And you kept thinking, how could a divine mind create something like this? So Gnosticism created a very good answer for this. That basically, no, it's not created on the divine mind. It's created on the error, and the divine mind given a spark of the soul to us, so we could escape that error. So the entire enlightenment is how to escape the error.
How do we reconcile this idea with the idea that I lost my thought right now, but we can become like Jesus if we go through this process and we let the Theosophical out for us. And we're so told that we are God in the making. So Jesus didn't have to didn't go through all this stuff we went through. If I'm reading what you said.
No, he came from different realm. He basically, according to the Gospel of Judas, he used the flesh of another man to whom he was in no way related. Then he returned to his he didn't return. He never been outside of it. He's a different realm. What is interesting that in all of the Gnostic teachings, he always says that you cannot find me by looking outside, by worshiping me, by contending with me. You have to find it only within you. And it's very hard for us because we like to emulate somebody good. You give us an example, and I'll try to be like that. And then the rules of the error, that he says you won't be ruled by you will be ruled by this rule. The rules of the error give me character of the stick, and then I will do something. Like, tell me I will go to heaven and I will be good. Tell me that I will go to hell and I will try to straighten up. Well, those are the rules of Cephas. Like, we need to leave these rules of punishment and reward and find the Christ within based on different rules, because these rules apply to this world that we're trying to escape. So as long as we play by these rules and try to go to heaven and try to go to hell and worship Jesus and go to church and do all of that, we are still rotating in the world of error. It's not taking us anywhere. We have to go within, and when you go within, you say, what is there within? There's nothing within. What do I find there? But that's where the answers are. I guess in our own experiences and in our processing of these experiences and our ascension.
In the voice, it says, I think it says in other places too, that if we go out here and we try and we mess up, we honestly try. This is what my concentration comes into. Then the masses will wipe it clean. They'll make it right. Now, how does that work with Jesus' philosophy if he's from a different world? I'm reading that he's from Bardelo, which is he hadn't gone through all this, at least now. We're going through it. Maybe to become a Bardelo, you have to go through it sometimes in the past. I don't know.
It seems like at least in the Gospel of Judas, this was created, and that's all there was. Everything worked like it worked in this realm, and Jesus was always there. And suddenly there was like a glitch in the system, glitch in the matrix, and there was an error in all of our world. So yeah, that Jesus never been here. So
He's never been there.
No, because he was not created in error. That's why, like, the parallel to Christian sort of believes that he was not conceived in sin. Like, it doesn't have any meaning or clarity what does it mean not to be consumed in sin. But when you look at it esoterically, that means he never belonged to the world of error. not like he was not conceived in sin. He never went through the evolution in this world. He comes from the different realm.
So this error is another thought that you had, that you laid out, was that this error goes up into the spiritual world too.
Yes, yes, that's the scary one. That's how it keeps all of us in error, because you need to the entire universe we know is an error. Everything, from our spiritual teachings to our hierarchy of power, because we create, like, if you would look at all of the non-esoteric teachings, there is a hierarchy. There is God on top. Everybody is subject to him. You have to please him. And the same, we create the hierarchy of humans, and the same, we create hierarchy between humans and animals. So it's based on that sort of order, submission, sacrifice. All of that is an error. None of this is necessary in the world of that is real. But we're so bound by it because from our spirituality and religions, we are in the creation of the Yaldabaoth, the Sepos, the Fool, the Craftsman. So we were completely, if it would be, and that's why Christ's visit was so significant, that he came in to bring a message from other world. That's why when Judas looked at him, he said, I know you're from Bardelo. Like, I know you're not coming from Yahweh, you're not from our angels, archangels, you are from outer world, outer realm. I don't know more, but that I know.
What the adepts of what do you call it, the Christian and all those, they came directly to. They didn't come through all this process. Well, I understand it anyhow.
I don't know.
Jesus was like the king. He came to show us, I guess, how to live that life, but he did not through him, but through his own internal process. He became who he was.
Mm-hmm.
And Buddha is the same, and Krishna
Mm-hmm.
and all those. What they're saying, that's what I'm reading into what you're saying.
It's also possible, because we have such limited information. It is possible, like the Buddha and the Jesus and Krishna were created in this other world, but maybe they basically went into this realm and lived through evolution here to see what our experience is,
So
and become masters. That could be too.
So they were masters.
Yeah.
And maybe we're going through the same process. It's through error.
Yeah.
Why would we be going through that if we're not supposed to be learning something from it?
No, we're learning. We need to
helping and teaching others. That's part of the philosophy.
There's something that he's attaching in the gospel here, that learning is not enough. You need to, and it's very similar also to both Hinduism and Buddhism. Learning is not enough. You need to realize illusion. You need to realize the illusory nature of the world. Like, you can learn everything, you can be good, you can ascend, you can be perfect, but you need to understand that this is an illusion, that this is an error. So I think that's sort of very interesting. You can translate error into in the Buddhism and Hinduism as an illusion. This is samsara.
Also, it's comparable to a good person versus a spiritual person. That's what you're explaining.
Yeah, could be. There's so many interesting things in it. Do we have any questions online?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll leave it.
I don't see anyone. Let me.
Hold on, folks, just a minute. But let me have. Did you turn it off?
No, I turned it on because I didn't see the screen.
Oh, okay. I'll put Ross it, check to see if anybody has any questions out there. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Nobody
I
says
lost my
anything.
train of thought. But it just really says to me, we need to know, we need to hear more of this stuff in the future.
quick question. Can
I'm not gonna
you,
volunteer you to do it. Yeah, I know it's a lot of work.
Okay.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Cyrus.
yeah, can you maybe explain the esoteric meaning of Sophia?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, yeah.
Sophia, esoterically, it's. I kept thinking about Sophia. Sophia is the last creation of the
Mhm.
Father and the Bardelo. She is the wisdom. So
Mhm.
in a way, Sophia has same nature as the Eve. She
Mhm.
is the one who creates the error. But esoterically, I think Sophia, since she is the wisdom, she is the wise one. She is the one who creates the material world because she is the first one that creates, not inside of the spiritual. So in a way, material form is the creation of Sophia and her son because she is the wisdom that is capable of creating. So, but she is no, there is nowhere any negative connotation about Sophia. In any references I look, Sophia is always the wisdom. How does the wisdom create error? This is very interesting. I don't know.
Thank you. Yeah.
But it looks like material world created the Sophia started the material world through her son. And the material world is created by Sophia without the partner. So basically the spiritual world doesn't have the same substance. It's half done.
Well, the spiritual world, I think Bob told that I was on the end of it, there's a spectrum here. The fully material on one end, the fully spiritual on the other. And they never, the twain shall meet.
Mm-hmm.
That you cannot be on this world in this world and make a difference unless you're in a material form.
And I kept thinking about Sophia also. She's the wise one, but one would think somebody who's wise would create with her partner, whatever that partner is. I think partner is just realization of two different capacities, the feminine and masculine in her. But she creates of herself despite being wise one. So this is sort of strange. And then I remember what came to mind now, the references in canonical gospels where Jesus says something like only the fool, only the basically insane will be saved, that the wise one won't be saved. It's the fool. I don't remember exact quote, but it's those who are not wise will be saved. So it seems like the rest of the hell.
I have a question. Who decided that Sophia made error? Whose decision is it that it is error?
Well, because it's an error because it can no longer exist in this realm. So the error in this realm, it's not compatible because she was missing half faculty to create things. It's like making, making a cake with flour without butter. She only had the flour. So it's an error in this realm. The Yaldabaoth convinced that this is all there is. So we even forget that there is something else, that because the creator said this is all there is, there's nothing else.
It's a ring past that line, ring past not, I think.
There is also spiritual created that is also an error. So that's what's so complex. And the belief is that this is all there is, and that's all we should worship, and we should try to ascend within the rules of this world. Just be good, just do the right things, and you'll be rewarded. All of that is basically being ruled by the rules of the child of chaos. That's why it's so important where, I want to read it again, it's so important what Jesus says in the gospel on not being ruled. that basically Michael lent the spirit to humans so they might serve. This meant so that kings of chaos don't rule over you. Because all these rules, all the beliefs that are established, they're established to rule over the souls that were given by the spiritual realm. Very difficult. And that's why the 12 disciples said, Jesus, we just better worship you, and we're happy with that. And we will sacrifice everyone at the altar and lead everyone astray, but this is too much. Sorry about that. Only Judas said, I have a vision, I see the truth. And said, that's why you'll be given the hardest job, to sacrifice me and be hated by everyone. And you'll be hated by everyone, so no one believes you. Because if you are the traitor, if you're the betrayer of Christ, how can you know my true teachings? So this is all part of the error.
Well, thank you, I think.
So thank you. This concludes our Gnostic teachings. It's time to...
This raises a lot of questions.
It's very interesting.
So thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll take, I guess, 5 minutes break and move to the reading of Bhagavad Gita.
Good.
Thank you.
So we'll just pause.